For many startups, especially startups who are in the B2C space, PR can be a very effective tool in reducing the cost of customer acquisition. But obviously PR doesn't happen for everybody, and it doesn't happen certainly by accident. And it most certainly doesn't happen just because you hired a PR agency. Doing PR or saying that PR is going to be an important component of how I reach my consumers or how I make my startup, how I make people aware of my startups, has to be a well thought through decision, and the CEO or the founders or whoever is involved in the process needs to be deeply involved in that process. It has to be a effort that you will need to put in. PR agencies and the other support services can only provide you the support in doing that, but that story has to be created by you. You need to understand the dynamics of the PR industry and how these things work. One of the interesting things in the way startups can leverage PR or get good PR is by leveraging their advisory boards, leveraging their mentors, and leveraging the profiles of some of the investors that may be involved into them. And that gets me to the point about the advisory board. If you look at the Silicon Valley, or if you look at some of the areas in which entrepreneurship has or entrepreneurial cultures have matured, you will find that most of the startups would have fairly strong advisory boards, and these are advisory boards not just namesake people who come in onto the advisory boards, but people who behave like a board member, who challenge the assumptions of the startups and who provide some level of assistance to the startups at the beginning of the year. And I would urge startups to look at creating extremely strong advisory boards or very well engaged advisory boards. And if you have people on your advisory board who are likely to be recognized by the industry, they could probably be of great help to you in getting some level of PR as well for your startup. Many startups are faced with the question in terms of what should my marketing budget be and what should my marketing objectives be. Depending on what stage you are, that answer is likely to be very different. But at the beginning of the journey, which is at the concept stage when you're just getting that product out into that market, you need to test a couple of things. One, you need to test the product itself, and of course that will happen with a few customers using it and so on and so forth. But more importantly, you want to be able to test the assumptions that you have made in the business case around the concept that you have built. So for example, if I spend this much, so many people I will be able to reach so many people. If I reach 10,000 people, X percentage of people are likely to register onto my site or onto my portal, or of the people who register, X number of people are likely to buy. Of the people who buy, the average ticket size is likely to be this. Of the people who buy, X number of people are likely to repeat purchase, and so on and so forth. Now, each of these components, how many people will you reach, how many of them will register, how many of them will buy, how many of them will buy at what level, so on and so forth, are the assumptions that you have taken into the business. Your marketing objectives in the first 6 to 12 months of the business should be about saying what is the right number that allows me to say that this assumption has been is now proven, and I will be able to replicate that in that marketplace. And therefore you have to raise, or you have to be able to raise enough money to get from a concept stage level into a stage where your assumptions are proven. In many cases, we've seen startups looking to raise an enormously large amount of money at the beginning of the journey, where a lot of that capital that they intend to raise is being projected for marketing or has been budgeted for marketing. And while that may be right, that may be right in the way they have thought about it, that's not necessarily the smartest way of going about it. I would urge you to break up your funding needs into two different components as well. Keep the first component as saying what is the kind of money that I require to prove the concept and the underlying assumptions around that, around that concept, and that is likely to be a much smaller number. Once you have your assumptions proven out, then you can go ahead and raise a follow-up round or a slightly larger round, which allows you to then define your marketing goals in different ways. How much money that you would require to spend or invest in marketing depends in terms of what your goals and objectives are. in an extremely competitive marketplace, say for example, if you're doing something in the travel industry, your goal should be to get to a level where your company starts becoming a serious player, in the sense, can I in the next 2 or 3 years become a double digit crore company, which allows me to or which makes the industry and every stakeholder take me seriously. However, on the other hand, if you are introducing a new concept and which is going to be fairly replicable by others, then in which case a land grab, which is saying that being a dominant player in that industry is going to be probably a more practical objective as far as your startup is concerned. Therefore, how much money you need for marketing will clearly be determined by what your goals and what your objectives and a strategic direction for that startup or for your stage of the venture are.